I don't think you understand how excited I am to film this video. I have been wanting to film this for quite a while, and I don't really know what to describe it as or how to market this video, or just like describe it like, you know, in the title or whatever. But basically this is just kind of like a recommendations video of my favorite fantasy books, and most of them happen to be like whimsical romantic fantasy. They don't really focus a lot on like war or violence or stuff like that, which is totally fine if you like that vibe. There are plenty of fantasy books that I love that have like war, violence, stuff like that. I blame like Frozen brain rot, Disney brain rot that I have personally, and it really influences the kind of fantasy books that I enjoy. And I just wanted to share a couple of these books with you because I've been wanting to talk about my favorite fantasy books for a while, and these are books that I literally will never shut up about. You would have to pay me to shut up about any of these books, and I'm so excited to bring them to you. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books to share, and some of them are adults, some of them are YA. So we're gonna get right on into this video. I hope you know what I'm talking about. I think that by the end of the video, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. So the first book that I want to talk about is Music of the Night by Angela J. Ford. And look at this cover. It's beautiful. It's iconic. The art style is so pretty. It's one of my favorite covers like of all time. It's so beautiful. And basically this is a fantasy retelling of the Phantom of the Opera, and I think, was it last year or 2 years ago, I went through this phase of like reading so many Phantom of the Opera retellings, and this was by far my favorite one. It was so good and so beautifully written. I wasn't really sure what to expect when I went into this book, but I was so pleasantly surprised by the writing style. Me personally, I love some like flowery language. I know not everybody likes that, so this might not be the perfect book for you, but if you are like me, you like really descriptive, beautiful prose, I highly recommend this book. And I can't really describe it to you because there's not exactly a plot, like an overarching plot. It's really about like setting an atmosphere. It's about these characters, and it's just sort of on the backdrop of this like Phantom of the Opera retelling. So I highly recommend this book, and I loved it. It was such a moment. It was such a vibe. It's perfect for the fall. Like if you ever just need like a really quick little read, I feel like this isn't super long. Yeah, it's about like 250 pages. So if you need like a short, quick little fall inspired read and are wanting something that's a little bit more romance based, I would highly recommend this book. I will say, I think there's a little bit of smut in this book, but like nothing super intense from what I can remember. But it is an adult romance fantasy, so go into it knowing that. And yeah, highly recommend it. This book is one that I finally read at the end of last year, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, I really should not have been surprised. But that is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. And this one, truly a fairy tale come to life. It is like one of the best adult fantasy books that I've ever read. Again, really beautiful prose. I actually listened to this as an audiobook, and it was so much fun. It was so immersive, and I really felt like I was in this like cold atmosphere. So this one might not be perfect for fall, but definitely save it for like November, December, January, like that time of the year. That would be perfect to read this book. I think it's perfectly described actually on the front cover. It says, Arden's debut novel has the cadence of a beautiful fairy tale, but is darker and more lyrical. And that is exactly what you need to know before going into this book. But basically it's about this young girl, and you get to watch her grow up a little bit. And she lives in this like very cold climate, but basically Vasilisa, or Vasya as she goes by in this book, she's very rebellious, very headstrong. She really wants to do things her own way, and she doesn't want to go through like the typical like marriage, babies, that sort of thing. But her dad ends up marrying this woman, and she becomes her stepmother, and she is very controlling and wants things her way. and she wants to prepare Vasya for either marriage or the convent, and Vasya's not having any of it, and the stepmother has also forbid them from honoring their household spirits, which becomes a really big problem. I think there's a lot of really good discussions about culture and religion and things like that that I really love to see explored in a fantasy setting, and this was just perfectly executed. I really need to finish this series though. I think this year, once I get to like November-ish, I will definitely pick up the second book because I am desperate for it. I really want to, but like I said, it's such the kind of series where you really need to be in the right moment to read it, so it's kind of hard to start this one when it's like 80 degrees outside. The next one, I actually just realized that I think that all three of these books so far have been retellings. I think the second book is a retelling of the Russian fairy tale Vasilisa the Beautiful, which I have actually read another book based on that same fairy tale, which is Vasa in the Night, but I think I included that one in my fall book recommendations. I can't remember, but another great book. Anyway, this is another retelling, and that is The Enchanted Sonata by Heather Dixon Walwork. This is a retelling of the Nutcracker, which I love. I don't know about you, I love the Nutcracker. I grew up watching like multiple adaptations of the Nutcracker, and I even watched one of my best friends as a kid. She performed in the Nutcracker. She was in ballet. I have always had a very, very special place in my heart for this story, and getting to see it in this book, iconic. This book was one of my favorite books of last year. It was so good, so well executed. Actually, did I finish it this year? I did start it last year, but I think I finished it this year. It's been a really, really long year. But this kind of blew my mind because I had put this off for so long, and then when I finally picked it up, I was like, why did this take me forever to read? What was I waiting for? It was so good. And I finished this book and I was desperate for a sequel. Desperate. But unfortunately, it seems like this author isn't publishing anything anymore. I think, at least from what I read on her website, or was it Instagram or something like that, it seems like she's not writing anything at the moment. So, and I wanted to email her being like, I loved The Enchanted Sonata, please write a sequel, but I didn't see any way to contact her, and I didn't really want to slide into her DMs, so I'm like, you know what, we'll just call it a wash. We'll just, you know, my heart's breaking right now, but it's okay. But yes, I loved this book, and if you know anything about the Nutcracker, you will kind of know the general plot of this book. I'll just read the back really quick. It says, Clara Stahlbaum has her future perfectly planned. Marry the handsome pianist, Johann Kahler, and settle down for a life full of music. But all that changes on Christmas Eve when Clara receives a mysterious and magical nutcracker. Whisked away to his world, an enchanted empire of beautiful palaces, fickle fairies, enormous rats, and a prince, Clara must fight a magician who uses music as spells, and the future she thought she wanted. The Enchanted Sonata, a retelling of the Nutcracker ballet with a dash of the Pied Piper, will captivate readers of all ages. It's true, it's true. The romance in here is so beautiful. The atmosphere is so beautiful. It's so immersive. It's so much fun. Very, very whimsical. I feel like this is probably one of the most whimsical books out of this entire stack. It is just perfect. And like I said with The Bear and the Nightingale, I feel like you need to read this book in like December, around Christmas time. Just do it. Just pick it up. It's so good. It's so good. Also, I believe that this is on Kindle Unlimited, and I also am pretty sure that this book is on Kindle Unlimited as well. So keep an eye out for those. We need a little bit of a coffee break. I'm sorry. I'm getting too excited. The next book that I would like to recommend, we're finally getting away a little bit from the retellings, and that is The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. I feel like almost nobody talks about this book. I know of a handful of people that I'm friends with have read it and loved it, but I feel like the majority of people on, you know, in the book community have not talked about this book enough. It's so painfully underrated. Seriously. And another like very whimsical fantasy, and I feel like this is actually a really great fantasy book to read during like the spring and summer. It's giving kind of that vibe with like the green and like the flowers and stuff like that. But I always describe this book as sort of The Handmaid's Tale meets Bridgerton. I feel like that's exactly, like, you kind of get the vibe immediately of what this book is kind of about. Basically, it's this main character and she has magic, and magic is kind of outlawed for women in this society in this book. And she is not allowed to use her magic. Once she gets married, she will have a collar placed around her neck that completely takes away her magic, or basically suppresses it, and she really does not want that. But she knows that because her family is not doing well financially, she is going to need to do what she has to do in order to make a good match and provide for her family ultimately, which is such a, you know, I was gonna say, which is such a bummer. I'm like, that's such a casual way of putting that. It's like so devastating. But she really doesn't want to do that. She really wants to be able to harness her magic, work on her magic, and she believes that everybody of all genders should be able to use their magic equally. And unfortunately, if she wants to follow her heart and become a mage, she will have to basically financially devastate her family. But if she wants to help them regain some sort of stability, she will have to completely lose herself in the process. So she really has a huge tough decision to make. She really wants to make everybody happy, but you can't make everybody happy. Anyway, this isn't a book review. This is me trying to get you to read this book. I loved this book so much. It really, really spoke to me. I really enjoyed the journey that this character went on. I could relate in so many different ways to this character. And honestly, C.L. Polk is such an incredibly talented fantasy writer. So if you kind of have the same sort of taste as I do in fantasy books, check out C.L. Polk. Like, their books are so good. The next book is actually kind of a Phantom of the Opera retelling as well. It's a bit more loose than the first book that I showed, but it is still definitely inspired by Phantom of the Opera, and that is Where Dreams Descend by Janelle Angelis, and I loved this book so much. And look at my nails actually kind of match the book. It's so cute. Anyway, I really enjoyed this one. I feel like if you're a fan of Caraval or like Stephanie Garber's books in general, this would be a really great book to check out if you haven't yet. On the inside it says, in a city covered in ice and ruin, a group of magicians face off in a daring game of magical feats to find the next headliner of the conquering circus. Fame and glory await the winner, but no contestant is safe when an unseen danger begins striking behind the scenes. Accidents, injuries, missing magicians. Though each act grows riskier, the show must go on, and the three entangled within the dark heart of it will do whatever it takes to keep their secrets from rising to the surface. Little do they know, on a stage where love, lies, and illusion collide, nothing ever escapes the spotlight, especially in a game with no way out. So, like I said, definitely giving like Caraval vibes, definitely giving the Night Circus vibes. Another fantasy book that is absolutely beautifully written. And this world is just so lush and magical and so much fun, and the romance is just so swoony. I highly, highly recommend this book. Another one that is just so underrated. I feel like so many of these books in this list are just very, very underrated. Definitely not underrated. I had to mention this book because I love it so much, and that is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I mean, this book holds the key to my heart, genuinely. Seriously, I love this book so much. I can't wait for the third book. I am just not gonna be, I'm unwell, honestly, at the thought of the third book. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know. I really want to reread the series right before the third book comes out, but I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, I loved it. It was so good. It was so beautiful. I mean, Stephanie Garber's books are just so much fun. Like, so much unabashed, unadulterated fun. So immersive. And her writing is just so propulsive. Like, there's always something happening. There's never a dull moment. There's never a moment in this book where I'm just like, oh, I'm bored. Oh, nothing's happening. Like, when are we gonna get to the good part? Like, there's always a good part. The parts just keep getting better and better. And I don't know, I mean, like, this book is so hyped. This book is such a popular book, but even then I feel like nobody truly grasps how good of a book this is, how good of a series this is. I actually kind of think that the second book is even better than the first one. I do have a hard time describing this book whenever I'm supposed to be describing it, so I'm gonna read the inside cover. And it says, "For as long as she can remember, Evangeline Fox has believed in true love and happy endings, until she learns that the love of her life will marry another. Desperate to stop the wedding and to heal her wounded heart, Evangeline strikes a deal with the charismatic but wicked Prince of Hearts. In exchange for his help, he asks for 3 kisses to be given at the time and place of his choosing. But after Evangeline's first promised kiss, she learns that bargaining with an immortal is a dangerous game, and that the Prince of Hearts wants far more from her than she'd pledged. He has plans for Evangeline, plans that will either end in the greatest happily ever after or the most exquisite tragedy." It's so good. And yes, this is technically a spin-off to Caraval, but if you didn't really like Caraval or you don't really have any plans on reading it, I feel like you can kind of jump into this book and it's going to be no problem. Yes, there will be a few spoilers. Yes, there might be some things that might be a little bit confusing, but I feel like you could still read this book without needing to read Caraval. And the next book I want to talk about is one that I literally will never shut up about. I won't ever, never. You would have to kill me. You would have to kill me to make me shut up about this, and that's The Crown's Game by Evelyn Skye. I recommend this book to anybody who will listen. Even people who won't listen, I recommend this book. It's so good. If you like The Night Circus, why haven't you picked this up? Why? It's so good. It's set in Russia. It's this duel, this sort of like competition between these two very, very magical, powerful wizards. They're competing to be the Tsar's wizard, and it's incredible. It's so good, so atmospheric, so beautifully written. The characters, the romance, there's a little bit of like a love triangle, just a little bit, and oh, it's so good. Also, my mom just got home, so the dogs are gonna go crazy. The dogs are just gonna go absolutely wild. It's so captivating, it's so beautiful, it's so much fun, it's iconic, it's everything. So I highly recommend it. It says, "Utterly enchanting, the true wizardry is in the atmosphere. Skye crafts a Russia of magic and elegance, depicting St. Petersburg in such a breathtaking way that you'll swear you're standing on the banks of the Neva and dancing through the halls of the Winter Palace." Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Thank you, Sarah Rosh of the Snow Like Ashes trilogy. Thank you. That's exactly how you describe it. The second to last book I'd like to recommend is another one of my all-time favorites, and that is A Winter's Promise by Christelle Debeau. This is a YA fantasy book that has been translated from French, so if you know how to speak French, you could totally read it in its original form. If you don't, like myself, you can read the translated version, which is amazing, and it's iconic and incredible, and it's like kind of a twist between Beauty and the Beast and Alice in Wonderland. It's really hard to describe. I feel like every time I try to describe this book, I am tripping over my words. But basically, this book follows a young girl named Ophelia, and she is in this arranged marriage. So she has to leave her home and go live with her new prospective husband. And basically, as you can see on the cover, they are on these sort of like arcs in the sky, and each arc is like a different, not really kingdom, but like society, and like different families rule each arc. So she is leaving her arc and leaving her home. I don't actually remember if she's on an arc or not, but going to her husband's arc, and things are weird. Things are very different, very socially different. That's why it's kind of like an Alice in Wonderland vibe, because things are just topsy-turvy. They're weird. And she has to try to grapple with like this new setting, these new people, these new dynamics. And it's really, really interesting, super weird, and a little bit unsettling in a way. And there were so many moments where I felt just so frustrated for this main character, like on her behalf, of being like, she doesn't deserve to be treated like this. But yeah, I did absolutely love this book. Another book that just has beautiful prose, and the characters are just so strong, and like I love them. They're so interesting. So I highly, highly recommend this book. And the very last book that I'd like to recommend is one by one of my favorite authors, and that is The Inheritance for Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. This book is just so much fun, and like I said, I think I recommended this in my fall books video. If you enjoyed the Disney movie Encanto, you might really, really enjoy this one. It's kind of like an adult version of that book, or that movie. But this book is a lot of fun. I do recommend it in that video, so if you want like to see that one, I will definitely link it down below. On the inside cover it says, "The Montoyas are used to a life without explanations. They know better than to ask why the pantry never seems to run low or empty, or why their matriarch won't ever leave their home in Four Rivers, not for graduations, weddings, or baptisms. But when Orquídea Divina invites them to her funeral and to collect their inheritance, they hope to learn the secrets that she has held on to so tightly their whole lives. Instead, Orquídea is transformed into a ceiba tree, her limbs stretching into roots and branches, leaving them with more questions than answers. 7 years later, her gifts have manifested in different ways, granting them unexpected blessings and powers. But soon, a hidden figure begins to tear through their family tree, picking them off one by one as it seeks to destroy Orquídea's line. Determined to save what's left of their family and uncover the truth behind their inheritance, her descendants travel to Ecuador, the place where Orquídea buried her secrets and broken promises and never looked back." It's so much fun. It's so beautifully written. It's such like a journey and a trip, and there's so many interesting characters in this book. I think that's kind of a running theme throughout every single fantasy book that I really like, is that the characters are just so strong and so distinct. And this book is definitely no exception to that. I loved it. Zoraida Cordova is one of those authors that I just absolutely adore. I will always recommend her books, and this one is definitely one of my favorites. So yeah, those are all of the fantasy books that I would like to recommend to you today. They're all a little bit whimsical. They're all definitely really fun and beautifully written. Like, the prose in every single one of these books is just so decadent, so lovely, so much fun to read. I feel like you can definitely see what my taste in fantasy books is just by looking at the stack. Like, you know immediately. I definitely have more that I could recommend, so maybe I will do a part 2 at some point, but these are the ones that I have on my shelves that I just really, really wanted to talk about this time. And I hope you all enjoyed getting to see these recommendations, and maybe you will pick them up at some point, possibly. I love getting to hear when you guys are like in the comments being like, "Oh my gosh, I just added so many of these books to Goodreads," and I'm like, yes, yes, that's exactly what I wanted. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Let me know down below if you have any fantasy recommendations that are in a similar vein to any of these books. I would definitely love to hear about them. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Storygraph, TikTok. All the links are down below. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye!
Ooh, I thought it'd be me and you.